All right, let us have stuff I like. Stuff I like as we head into the Klavanless weekend. You know, we had Victor Davis Hanson on last week, and I was talking to him about taking down Confederate statues. And he was, he's a historian, and he was talking about, the fact that these things are don't just represent what the person who is memorialized represents, but they represent history. And you can be an adult and discuss history and understand that you might represent someone's. You might be representing a moment in history without agreeing with the thing that person stood for. But, and he mentioned, while he was talking, he mentioned Joan Baez's recording, famous left-wing protest singer, folk singer. He mentioned her recording The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, which is about a working class guy in the South remembering the day that Dixie fell and how his brother died. And he's a working man. His name is Virgil Caine. And she basically plays out that thought. And this is largely considered one of the great rock songs or folk songs of all time. It constantly makes those lists, of like the top 20 or top 100 songs. It was absolutely iconic in its time, even if people have forgotten it. And the thing is, it is part of a tradition that the West, that has been with the West from the very beginning. When you go back to the earliest, take the Iliad. The Iliad, is written by a Greek, but the Trojans, it's about the Greek-Trojan War, but the Trojans come across as noble people. Hector is really the most heroic person in the Iliad. The Persians, right? They beat the Greeks, beat the Persians, and then Aeschylus wrote the Persians, where he looked at things from the Persians' point of view. The Trojan Women by Euripides, the same thing. In the Middle Ages, they had the Song of Roland, which had the Muslim hero Saladin. It was about the Crusades. Roland went off, it was a crusader, went off in the Crusades, but he talked about Saladin, the great Muslim hero, on the other side, and he's represented as a noble person. At the end of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln exemplified that tradition by welcoming the South back without wanting to impose on them terrible fines, without really wanting to crush them. Basically, if you come back, you're back. And many of the people who fought on the Confederate side were buried in federal graves. So they were celebrated as American soldiers. And that is part of the tradition of the West. So these clowns who are going around attacking the Confederacy, pulling down Confederate statues, and of course already moving on to Thomas Jefferson and the rest, these people are violating one of the most important principles of the West, the principles of preserving history, of understanding the other guy's point of view. I mean, that is essentially what the West is about, is understanding the other guy's point of view, even as you fight for and stand for your principles. There was a movie called Gods and Generals, came out in 2003. I can't remember if they put it on TV first and then released it, but it had Robert Duvall playing Robert E. Lee. And there's this wonderful speech where he looks out at the Potomac and somebody says, oh, that's where George Washington crossed the Potomac. And General Lee says, never mind that. That's where I met my wife. And he starts to talk about what the land means, because Robert E. Lee was offered the generalship of the Union troops, and he turned it down because he was loyal to his land. And this is this great speech, Robert Duvall as Robert E. Lee, talking about what the Yankees can't understand about the South.
There's something these Yankees do not understand, will never understand. You see these rivers and valleys and streams, fields, even towns, they're just markings on a map to those people in the war office in Washington. But to us, oh my goodness, they're birthplaces and burial grounds, they're battlefields where our ancestors fought, places where you and I, we learned to walk, to talk, and to pray. Places where we made friendships and, oh yes, fell in love. And they're the incarnation of all our memories, Mr. Taylor, and all that we are. All that we are.
See, that kind of loyalty to the land is something we remember about people, and something that makes people noble. And we even understand this of some of the Germans who fought for the most horrible philosophy ever. We understand that some of them fought for their country because they didn't catch on that maybe their country had left them. We know that not all of the people who fought and died on the side of the Germans were Nazis. This is something that we understand about the past, and why we honor people even though they stood for something that we now find reprehensible and unacceptable. That is the whole point of the West, is to understand, because when you understand things, you can build you can go forward. And that's the same thing of listening to people you disagree with. When you understand the guy you disagree with, you can start to see what you're trying to move toward. Even making the argument makes you a better person, a more thoughtful person. All right, the Klavanless weekend is coming on. At least there doesn't seem to be a hurricane on the way, but I hope it is not a Klavanless weekend for Shapiro and Berkeley. I hope he comes back, even though I would seize the title of biggest podcast on the Daily Wire if he doesn't. But no, I really hope he does. I hope you all stay safe. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is the Andrew Klavan Show. Survivors of the Klavanless weekend will gather here again on Monday.
Like my father before me, I'm a working man. And like my brother before me, I took a rebel stand. Well, he was just 18, proud and brave, but a Yankee laid him in his grave. I swear by the blood below my feet, you can't raise a cane back up when it's in defeat. The night they drove old Dixie down, and all the bells were ringing. The night they drove old Dixie down, and all the people were singing. They went na 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 na.